Okay, today I'm going to review Scale. Scale. The Universal Laws of Life, Growth, and Death in Organisms, Cities, and Companies by Geoffrey West. So I thought this book had a pretty interesting premise. I thought it was going to illuminate some universal laws. I mean, that's the first sentence it says in the subtitle. Pretty much right away, I was disappointed with this book. I didn't think it really got to the point very fast. The author really doesn't stay on topic. He kind of just jumps around, talks about himself a lot, which I did not like. But really, the book just never delivers on the promise set out in the title here. There's no universal laws. There's just a bunch of mildly interesting facts that only relate to similar items like cities to cities or organisms to organisms or companies to companies, but there's no universal law of anything. It was kind of disappointing. There are some interesting charts in here. All right, so there's some interesting charts. Most of the things they talk about in this book I thought were pretty common sense. There weren't any really revelationary scaling things in the book. I mean, it's all things you would expect. The first thing it really talks about is mammals. It starts with organisms and talks a little bit about that, but it really focuses on mammals. That's where a lot of the research is. And some of the graphs it shows to really wow you is like the metabolic rate of animals depending on their size. And it shows how if you plot it on a logarithmic scale, it's a straight line from, mice all the way up to elephants. And you're expected to kind of believe that this is something that is new or interesting or, it's really just common sense. You would think that the thermal efficiency of an animal would be dependent on how much surface area it has relative to its volume. So an elephant has a pretty small surface area compared to like its massive volume, so it should have a much easier time, maintaining body temperature and things like that. So you would expect it to have a lower metabolic rate, but somehow the author makes you believe, or the way he talks about it is he says you would expect it to have a much higher metabolism, and so it's shocking that it has a lower metabolism. But really, from my perspective, it's pretty common sense. A huge amount of the energy of a mammal goes to regulating temperature. So the more kind of insulated an organism is, the less energy it should need. It's like the better insulated your refrigerator is, the less energy it uses. That's not revolutionary. That's not really interesting. That's common sense. But it's kind of shown to you like you should be wowed by it. And then the book kind of moves on to cities, and it's the same thing again. It talks about a lot of interesting things or things that seem interesting on the surface, but at second thought or at closer view, they're not really very revolutionary or interesting. Most people have heard the fact that people talk faster in big cities. And if you know how fast people talk or how fast people walk, you can estimate how big the city they live in is. The book kind of talks about a couple things like that, but again, they're not really revolutionary. They're just kind of common sense. And he always talks about things at this very high level when, all the real science is kind of below that. So, like when you get in, to go back to the mammals, he talks about the metabolic rate, but there's tons of real science being done on animals. And he kind of makes it seem like he's doing something revolutionary, but he's really just this real high level correlation, scaling stuff and plotting it down. It's just, I don't know. I wasn't really wowed by it. I never came away from any part of this book like retaining anything special that I can use in the future. It's really just mildly interesting stuff. Then the last kind of big topic he talks about is companies and, companies growing and how long they live. And I come from the financial world. That's where I work, and I analyze companies for a living. And it was really it was so high level. There was nothing interesting said. I mean, he found a couple correlations, but I mean, there wasn't anything there. It's just like pretty charts and a lot of talk about, how amazing it is. But then this kind of feels hollow and empty. Like there's nothing underneath there. There's no like big revelations. There's nothing there at the heart of the book where you'd want it to. I don't know. It's really just you get this empty feeling, or at least I did after I read it, because it just didn't seem like there's anything useful underneath. I think it really promises a lot more than it delivers, and nothing in the book is unified. All these, scaling laws that the author finds, they're all between similar things. Like, of course, mammals are similar to mammals. I mean, they're scaled versions of each other. So, of course, you can find correlations and patterns and weird things between them. And cities are versions of each other. I mean, it's the same thing again. It's like, it's no big surprise that you find a bunch of patterns between cities. I mean, there are people in cities, and in most places you're traveling by cars to work, to eat food. I mean, it's all the same thing, just in a different size. So it's not shocking that there are patterns there, but again, the book really like puts this forward like you're going to be wowed by it, and it's really like just hollow. And the end of the book, the author kind of proposes this grand unified theory, which really is like a slap in the face, because most nonfiction books, most science books, they start off with weird, interesting facts that people didn't really understand. And then it goes in and it follows the scientists as they understand and explain these things. And it kind of has a conclusion where they put all the pieces together. And there's really like this arc of a story from like mystery and interest. And then, they're doing the work of solving it. And then there's like a conclusion at the end where we really have a big picture understanding of everything. And this book ends with a proposal to make a unified theory. And it's just, that's not enough for a book. I mean, there's just not enough there. But by far, the worst thing about this book, and the reason why I stopped listening to this book a few times, and I mean, I didn't stop reading it, I stopped listening to it. I read this book, or I listened to the book on audio tape during my commute the first time I read it. And this book was so boring in parts, and the author was so excruciating to listen to, that I would just turn it off and start listening to music. And not even good music, just what was ever on the radio, because this is the only thing I had on my phone at the time. And that's only happened with a few books ever, that it was so bad that I had to stop listening to it. And the only way I was able to finish listening to the book was by putting it on like 1.5 speed, so I could like get through all the nonsense quicker. Because the author spends so much time talking about himself, and it has nothing to do with anything in the book. Oh my God, the number of times he talks about the Santa Fe Institute, which is just where he works. It's just an office. People just sit there and they do research. Like, there's no reason to mention it that many times, and yet he talks about it hundreds of times every time he gets a chance. And it's so excruciating to listen to, because he never seems to realize that no one cares about some office in Santa Fe who has nothing to do with the science or anything or the point of the book. He just throws it in there and expects you to be as interested in it as he is. And it's just, I mean, it was terrible to listen to, honestly. I don't know if there's an index in here, but there must be hundreds of references to when he mentions the Santa Fe Institute. I mean, if you started a drinking game where you drank every time he mentioned it, I mean, it would take you a year to finish the book, because you'd get drunk so fast every time you started reading. It's that bad. So in the end, I can't recommend this book. It was long, it was drawn out, there was no big conclusions at the end, it wasn't that pleasant to listen to. I mean, the physical book looks nice, there's some pretty charts in it, but overall, I wouldn't recommend this to anyone. If you want to learn something interesting, if you're in the market to read a book that's going to be informative and interesting and really have something that you can take away that will add to your knowledge, it's not this book. Go somewhere else. Hope you like this video. Like, subscribe. We got some more book reviews coming in the future. A lot of them are much better than this book. I've already read a lot of them. But that's it.